All right, so let's get started drawing in one-point perspective. Now let's remember in one-point perspective, we're going to start with a rectangle. And so we're going to go ahead and draw a rectangle, which is going to give us our two sets of lines. We're going to have vertical lines and we're going to have horizontal lines, okay? And then we're going to have our last set of lines go to the vanishing point. So whenever we're drawing a one-point perspective box, we have three choices of lines. It's either a vertical line or a true horizontal line, or it's a diagonal going to the vanishing point. All right, so again, let's go ahead and get started drawing those one-point perspective boxes. So what I'm going to want you to do is you're going to want to take and tape your 18 by 24 piece of paper onto your board. Now this is a little smaller because I'm going to show you how we're going to set this up, and then I'm going to switch over to a sheet where I've got some boxes drawn, and we'll finish out a couple boxes on there to show you kind of the assignment that I'd like you to do. But first off, we want to, when we have this clean piece of paper, in about the middle of the piece of paper, and it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, we're not going to measure or something, we're going to go ahead and create our horizon line, okay? And just to make sure that I remember that, I'm going to go ahead and label this horizon line. Now, you might say, why would I label this? It seems silly, but it's a good habit to be in. And I can't tell you how many times people get confused because they don't label things out like I tell them to. And I know because I got lost when I didn't do it when I was learning this stuff back in the day. But the horizon line and the eye level are the same thing. And for our one-point perspective, which is what this is, one-point perspective, this means that we are looking straight out, for the most part, straight ahead. And with one-point perspective, we have the horizon line that we're going to create. And then approximately in the middle, we're going to also create the vertical line. Now I'm going to make this a broken line. I don't want to break. I want where the horizon line is. I need it to cross the horizon line. But this right here is my center of vision. All right. So this is my horizon line and my center of vision. Now what's interesting, and for us we want to remember, is that when we are putting down the horizon line, center of vision, where these two cross, that's my one-point vanishing point. So I'm going to label. Now I'm making a dot there just to let you guys know, where it is, to emphasize it. When I'm drawing, I wouldn't necessarily do that because the bigger the dots you make, the more it obscures the actual point, and we want all our lines to meet as close to exactly at the same place as we possibly can. But I'm going to label this right here as my one-point vanishing point. Okay? And again, wherever the center of vision and horizon line cross, that's the one-point vanishing point. So when we are creating, now you'll see me using these pencils a lot, and this is a black Prismacolor. If I was drawing for myself, I'd be using graphite, but these show up really well on the camera, so that's why I'm using the Prismacolor pencils. But so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to create our first box. Now, when we're creating our boxes, you want your box to either straddle the horizon line or be all the way below or all the way above. You don't want a box to rest right on that line and touch like that. It would be correct, but it will look weird. Why don't we do that right now? Let's go ahead and create that. This is one of these ones where you're going to have both sides line up and the 90 degrees is a straight line, which looks a little bizarre. So I'm going to go ahead and create a box. Now remember, with one-point perspective, this was our front view. just to remind you about what we were doing in that first class. And with the front view, we start with a true rectangle. But anyways, I can go ahead and finish this box. This will be a box where there's 3 lines in the 3 sets. So this right here has 3 A lines, as we labeled them in that first class. 3 A lines, right? If it's on the left side, that's a B line, okay? And so we've got 1, 2, oh, that's right, because we can't because of the fact that this actually touches, we would have to see through it to see the 3rd B line. In fact, why don't I go ahead and do that? I'm going to go ahead and draw the entire box. So I'm going to put 4 lines in each set. And I'm going to make the lines that are invisible lines, they're going to be checkered, or broken, as people would say. And that to distinguish them from the lines that can be seen. These lines can be seen. That's an invisible line. Okay. And we're just going to go ahead and can make it broken. And then this right here would come down. Okay. Now again, this looks very bizarre, because this would be B, B, right here. And this is really confusing me, because this right here is B. The way they line up is just strange. And then if we had the C lines, this would be C, C. This section here would be C. This section here would be C. This section here would be C. And then we'd have the front line and the back line sit on top of one another. So we'd have, this would be a B line, that would be a B line, this would be a B line, and this would be a B line. But basically, just what you want to remember, again, I'm going to shade this in as if this was the side. Well, it is the side. But this is 2 different lines, and yet they're the same straight line. It's correct. This right here is 90 degrees in perspective, but because it touches the horizon line, there is no difference of angle, and so it looks bizarre. You would never want to draw this. And so the way we would, I probably should have shown you one box first before we jumped into this, but you just don't want to touch something to the horizon line. I can do one of 2 things to solve this. I can bring this past the horizon line just a little bit, and that means we'd also extend this line right here, would come across the line, and then we would take this to the vanishing point. Now once we do this, we're going to get an angle difference between this side and this front side, and it will look more normal. So the one other thing about perspective that we really start to study is what looks normal, what looks right versus what looks bizarre. So there are things that we could draw that even though they're accurate, you would never draw them that way. So if I ever have a box that touches this horizon line, which again is my eye level, that means I just have to change my eye level. How would I do that? Well, I could squat down, or in other words, I could just kind of sit down in my seat a little bit if you're sitting, or if you're standing, you just slump your shoulders a little bit. And if you slump your shoulders, that's going to lower the box a little bit. Okay? If I stood up straight and on my tippy toes, that would bring the box off of the horizon line. If you sit up in your chair, that will bring this up off the horizon line. Or I took this one and I sunk it down. Okay? So either way will work. So if I have a little box up here that I've taken off the horizon line, again, if it's really close to the horizon line, it'll be the angles will be splayed. but it still looks better than if it's sitting on the horizon line. So let's just show you what that looks like. Whenever we draw a one-point perspective, I probably should have just started with this, but whenever we start with a one-point perspective, just like our front view, we start with a rectangle. And where those lines meet of that rectangle, we call those intersections eyes. Okay, and we could then take those eyes, all four of them would go back to the vanishing point. Okay, so that would go to the vanishing point. These are parallel lines going away from me into space, back towards that horizon line. Okay, and we're trying again to make everything meet at as clean a point on that vanishing point as absolutely possible. That's very important. That we don't want a vanishing area. We don't want stuff that's not really, it's kind of all over the place. We want it to keep it as tight as possible. Now there's a shadow on this, so it's a little harder to do. Like that right there looked like the pencil was closer than what it actually was. But now we've got all four lines, this, 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 and this, going away to that vanishing point. And then to finish this, we have to decide to go ahead and finish this out. So the first thing I do is I decide, this is arbitrary, but how deep is that box? And I decided that's how deep it is, and I connected the top and bottom of this left plane coming back. And then I have to build off that line. So I have to either go over to the right on the bottom or over to the right on the top. Now, going over to the right and connecting the top left and the top right is easier because this is pretty close. It's pretty tight down here and it would be harder. This opens up a little bit more. It's easier to see, and so yeah, go with what's easier. Why wouldn't you? So you have to build off the line. I couldn't drop a line here and then drop a line there and then hope they connect. They won't. They have to be built off of each point. So this now connects the top left and the top right, and I bring this down till this corner connects to the bottom right, which is right about there. Again, we're going to be seeing very little of the bottom of this. And if we did this right, the bottom right and the bottom left should line up so that I could connect them with a line that is the underside of this box. Now, these are invisible lines, so these should actually be broken lines. That's an unseen line. Okay. This is an unseen line. And then we're going to darken the lines we can see. I can see the front box. So we'll darken the rectangle because I can see the front face. So I'll make those a little darker. I can also see the underside of this, so I could take my triangle here and connect. Well, I've already connected them, but to darken the underside of this, like so. And now I can't do this very well with Prismacolor because they don't erase very well, but I would erase away the lines that are no longer needed. What I mean by that is this line ends right there, so that line could then be erased off. The unneeded portion of this line that was just to give us the convergences, these parallel lines converging at this vanishing point. This one stops right at that corner, so I would erase anything beyond that corner. This one stops at that bottom corner. I would erase anything off of that bottom corner. This one stops right here, so I would erase, again, that line that goes to that far side. I blew out part of that underside, so I now have to redraw it. But in the beginning, it can sometimes be very hard just to see the boxes. And the reason why is because our mind knows that this is a flat piece of paper, and we're trying to trick ourselves into thinking that it's three-dimensional. But we know it's not three-dimensional. We know it's two-dimensional. And so our brain keeps trying to, understand what it's looking at. And it can be very disconcerting, but this is how we create this box. And again, this would be the underside that would be seen because it's a little bit above my eyes. In other words, above my head. So this would be the bottom side. This here would be the left side. I can't see the top because it's above my head. I can only see the bottom. Okay. And then I can see the front. There's the three sides that we can see. We can only see three sides. Whenever you're looking at a box, you want to at least be able to see two sides. If I put, and I'll show you, I've got a whole bunch of squares drawn, including a square that's right here, and it's a box, but I can't see the top, nor the bottom, nor the right or left, because if it straddles the center of vision, you can't see the right or left. If it straddles the horizon line, you can't see the top or bottom. And so all you ever see is a front square. It's correct, but it looks weird. Let's go ahead and do one more of these to show you how we do this. And so again, just real quick, we're going to go ahead and start, and it can be any, this rectangle can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a certain place. Well, I mean, I don't want it to touch here either. You don't touch something right on the center of vision either, because it's just like touching something right on the horizon line. And I'll show you an example of that in the larger piece of paper that has a bunch of one-point perspective boxes that I've drawn. So we're going to start with our two sets of lines, because a rectangle is two sets of lines, two vertical lines and two horizontal lines that meet at 90 degrees. Okay, there you go. Now the fact that I went beyond this is fine, better than stopping short, because I need to see exactly where these corners are right here. Okay, I've got the four corners of that rectangle. Now that I've got the four corners of the rectangle, now here's the other thing. People will have this and it will hook onto their board, and they forget I can use this as a straight edge as well. And the easiest way to use this as a straight edge is to flip it over, and now it won't hook on that board. And so I can take this. This saves me from having to get a ruler. Some people like having the ruler, which is fine, but we're going to go ahead and connect all 4 points. Whoops, not quite there. There we go. All 4 points to that vanishing point. Again, this vanishing point that represents this far distant star, or 25 miles down the road. That's what that represents. And again, sometimes people are like, why are we doing this again? Why do I even care about these boxes? Well, remember, in the power of line, we said, okay, we started with drawing using measuring, and we measured the height lines and the width lines, and we created a rectangle that everything can fit inside. Everything can fit inside the rectangle. Not everything, but the object that we measured could sit inside its rectangle. And we built some fairly complex items using construction drawing, then using rectangles, triangles, and circles to then help us construct and draw complex shapes. Well, there are other things that are so complex that we can't just use two-dimensional shapes. We have to use 3D shapes. And 3D shapes, every 3D shape can be put within inside a box, or more clearly a cube, and you can build all kinds of boxes by stacking cubes and all that sort of stuff, just like we stacked rectangles and cut them up in all kinds of ways using armature of the rectangle in the power of line. So again, I've got all 4 corners and now have their parallel lines that are receding away from me, back into space, are receding away and going to this back vanishing point. Okay. Now remember, we have to be able to see the planes. This is a top plane, this is a left plane, bottom plane, right plane. In the beginning, it's hard to even just see the planes, but once you do, it's a whole lot easier. I'm going to arbitrarily decide how deep this is. I'm going to say, all right, well, let's go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to connect the top and bottom of our line. All right, look at that. And so we got the top and bottom of that line connected. I also want to make sure that this is good and tight. I don't want it to be, a crack between that and the board, because that means I'm not using it as a T-square. This is not going to be 90 degrees. It has to be, it's on the board being square, so that if it rests on the board, everything, as long as this is nice and tight on the board, will be 90 degrees. So I went ahead and connected the top and bottom of this left plane, and then we have to build off of it. So you either have to build off the bottom or the top. I think on this one I built off the top, so let's do this one on the bottom. Now, I already know that this is going to be an invisible line, so I'm going to make this, I'm going to start by making this checkered. So I'm going to go ahead and there we go. So this now meets right there. I've connected the bottom left corner and the bottom right corner. Now this is going to come up because I have to build off the line, either this line or that line. I'm coming around the opposite way this time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line this up exactly with that corner as close as I can. Your corners need to be true. So in other words, yeah, they have to line up as close as you can possibly get them. And then, if we've done it right, this should be perfect. Now, it's not. So this stops there, and this one stops there. This will happen, that this right here and this right here cannot be connected by a straight line. And what people will try to do is they'll try to go, okay, well, I'm just going to put a diagonal line. But that's a no-no. We can't do that, because every line in this family has to be straight, because these are truly parallel. The verticals are truly parallel. The only thing that becomes a diagonal is something that is going into space away from me. Okay? And so what happens when we have this happen is I'll split the difference. I can either bring this one straight over and then change the diagonal, or bring this one straight over and change the diagonal. But it's better to fudge the diagonal, because we can't, our eyes don't do well with diagonals. Our eyes are pretty, we've talked about this before, the idea that our eyes are kind of clumsy. But I brought this over, and now this actually hits the line right there. So what I will do instead is you'll take your triangle here, and using this triangle, I'm going to connect it to that new corner. Now that means that this angle isn't perfect. However, once again, it's close enough. That little change, which is less than a 1/16 of an inch, is probably a 32nd. No one will ever know that. Now these two are invisible lines. I can't see those, but so is this one. I didn't make this one checkered, so now I have to. So I'm going to come over here, clean this up. I can't erase this all the way because this is Prismacolor, but I can lighten it a little bit. So I'm going to take off the line that stops at that corner. I'm going to take off the line that stops at this corner. I'm going to take off the line that stops at that corner. I'm going to take off the line that stops at that corner. Okay. And then I'm going to make this a checkered line. Okay. Like so. And then we're going to darken the parts of the line we can see. So yeah, let's try this. Darken this. And of course I could also erase that little bit if this wasn't made out of Prismacolor. We can go ahead and just darken again the lines that can be seen right there. There we go. And then we're going to go ahead and come down here, and this is the fun stuff. And again, we come over here. Come over here. Now again, when people first start doing this, again, sometimes people are like, why are the boxes? Again, we're going to start to draw things in the intermediate classes and advanced classes. We're going to start using boxes. And we're going to take boxes, we're going to divide them up, and we're going to turn them into cars and carve away things out of them so they're turned into planes or motorcycles or bicycles or stereos or any sort of thing that's very boxy. A table, a chair, all those things would be started with a box. And it's because of the fact that it has a very clear perspective. If I'm drawing a bookshelf, definitely perspective. You know, all this stuff, it's always in play whether we want it to be or not, it is. And if we're going to draw in a representational way, we have to be aware of it and respect it. So again, I could go ahead and this would be the left side that goes away from me, right? And again, these are the way we know that something is a one-point perspective box is that it will have a true horizontal line. With one-point perspective, you have 3 sets of lines, and those lines are, one set is vertical. Okay, I'm just going to put vert for vertical. One set is horizontal. I'm just going to put HOR and a dot for horizontal. And one set goes to the vanishing point. So I'm going to put goes to VP, vanishing point. Okay? So that's it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 truly horizontal lines, 1, 2, 3, 4 truly vertical lines, and 4 lines that go to the vanishing point. This one, this one, this one, and that one. So again, there's only 3 sets of lines whenever we are drawing any box of any sort. So this would be the left side again. And sometimes, again, it's hard to see the box until you've drawn a few of these. People all the time, I can't see the box. Then I'll start to put shading on it, like, oh, there it is. Again, because our brain's trying to decide what is it that I'm actually looking at. And then when you start to put value on it, it sort of enforces the illusion of, oh, this is supposed to be 3D because we have dark, medium, and light. So we see the left side, the front side, and the top side. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get out the full sheet that's going to have about 10 boxes on it to show you how different the boxes look, whether they're above the horizon line or below the horizon line. We can have rectangles and boxes of all sorts and sizes, rectangles that we turn into boxes of all sorts and sizes. And so, yeah, we'll go ahead and put this up here, and I'll finish out a couple boxes, and that'll be your assignment. All right, so we'll be right back.